Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is Season 6, session number 27, and tonight we're going to be talking about Episode 11. This is the antepenultimate episode of the 6th season, so we are beginning to get into that. We've just escaped from Angband at the end of the last episode, and this episode is really sort of an interim episode. But I have to tell you, although this is not an episode that contains, well, I was about to say it doesn't contain big events, except the wedding of Beren and Luthien, which is arguably a big deal. But besides that, it's not, we had the theft of the Silmaril last time. We're gonna get the hunt for the wolf and the death of Beren next time, and the death of Huan. We're gonna get the appearance before Mandos, and the episode after this. We got all they got these 4 episodes, right, with all these big, high drama, high profile events, and this one is the healing Beren so he doesn't die of his wound, and bunches of family reunions, where people just talk to each other and stuff. Anyway, it's as I say, it's kind of a an interim session. But I have to tell you, here's why I'm really excited about this episode. Here's what I love about this episode. Demonstrates everything that is fun about doing this project. Seriously, everything that is fun about doing this project. Because first of all, and I don't just mean in the sense it's true, it's fun to kind of fill in some of these gaps, right? We don't really get much of anything described in the story between, them being carried off by the eagles and then them showing up before Thingol, basically, right? That's kind of the sequence in the text. But other stuff should have happened there. I mean, it's not... Anyway, filling in holes is fun. But the great thing is the way in which the length and detail of this project enables, there is so much payoff in this episode. It just made me really, really happy, right? We get to, almost every time. So about, I don't know, maybe 75, 80% of the fun payoff in this episode is... paying off all the work that we've done in previous seasons, where these characters come back and there's this rich history of story and association with them that we can just dip into and bring these stories together. Of course, the story of Andreth and Aignor, for instance, is never actually connected with the story of Beren and Luthien, right? So to have this mind-blowing episode of coolness where Andreth herself meets Beren and Luthien. I mean, what a phenomenal sort of follow-up from having done the Athrobeth episodes and everything to have Andreth live to see this. And then and then also to be planting the seeds for payoff yet to come, right? For instance, the fact that the interactions with Rian and the way that we are setting up, it's, if you know the Silmarillion text, you can see how we are setting up the death scene of Rian, right? Laying the foundations for what's going to happen there. Later, next season. Maybe next season, maybe the season. I'm not sure exactly. Probably in next season. I'm still not sure where next season is going to end exactly. But
next season ends with the Nair knife.
Right.
Hey,
which is
spoiler alert. The Twitch chat wants us to remember.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. Right. Spoiler alert. That's
so
right.
Next season is the Huan and Huar season.
Right.
And so it ends with those characters doing their thing.
Right. I'll say this. I won't spoil whether the Battle of Unnumbered Tears ends happily or not. I'll just leave that a mystery, right? But anyway.
So the question is going to be, because the battle is going to go on over multiple episodes. It's the Nirnaeth Arnodiad, right? But which episode is going to be named Nirnaeth Arnodiad? Is the question.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we going to have like a tier counter, right? Until it like gets up above a certain threshold and then, but no, anyway, yeah. So, right. But my only question was, is Rian going to die at the end of season 7 or the beginning of season 8? But anyway, point is that, again, like whether we're bringing in characters, it's so much fun to go to. The only thing that's more fun than getting to visit sort of parts of Tolkien's world and develop characters and places that just don't feature centrally in the story, but we've gotten a chance to kind of live there and develop those characters. The only thing more fun than doing that is going back and visiting, right? When you can just do that. So I find this episode just like rewarding on every front. It is so cool. But anyway, let's actually move towards it here. Quick announcements. We've got first of all, a bunch of moots upcoming. Tex Moot coming up very soon. Indeed, the day after tomorrow is Tex Moot. I'll be flying down to San Antonio tomorrow, so looking forward to seeing folks at Tex Moot. You can still, if you're in or near San Antonio, you can still join us, or you can join us online through our hybrid interface. We're gonna be in Toronto on May 20th. And then we've got Cascade Moot, Middle Moot, and New England Moot coming up in the fall. Our first trip to the Pacific Northwest, really fun. Really looking forward to that there. We've been talking about some other. I think we're going to get Mountain Moot back again this fall too, back in Denver. So be able to hang out with Tony again. Tony's working on that. Anyway. So look forward to a moot near you. We've been talking about another Canadian site for next year, which will be really fun. And then, of course, Myth Moot down in Leesburg, Virginia, June 22nd to 25th is coming up soon. And that is the big event of the year. Really excited to get down to National Conference Center and seeing folks again down there. A little film business going on here. The casting nominations are still open, so we're hoping to do the casting episode soon. So we're going to be opening voting soon, not right away. We still need some more nominations. So go to the message board and check out the list of roles that are available and make some nominations. Encourage you strongly to do that, and we will be talking about casting and discussing the elections and things when that has come through. But last call for nominations here, so I hope folks will check that out. We're still casting Beren. It's a big deal, right? So we're this is there aren't too many huge roles, but there are a couple big ones, right? We're casting Huon's voice actor. We're casting Beren. It's a big deal. All right, so the map now with highlighting. So we've got Amon Obel, the Pass of Adach, and Menegroth here, as we're going to be over in Brethil for a bunch of the time, and then in Menegroth a bunch of the time here too. It's all about the family reunions this episode. So we've got the primary story is Beren and Luthien. So the quest is sort of over, mostly over, right? Anyway, they've escaped from Angband, but Beren is near to death from the bite of Karkaroth, and so we've got to heal Beren, and then they gotta figure out what to do and head back to Doriath. They go to Brethil and meet the folks there, and again, that's where so many of the reunions that I am excited about are happening there. And then the C plot is Galadriel returning to Doriath. Galadriel's last brother is dead, and she's not happy about it. So we've got some strong scenes there between Galadriel and Thingol in the C plot there. So that's what we're looking at, and let's go ahead and start this. This time I do want to start with the A plot. I went backwards last time, but I do want to start with the A plot today. So this element is, I think, is it fair to say, I think this is the biggest addition to the storyline that we've made. Like, that's as far as like elements that we're just like where we're just like inventing a whole chapter essentially that really isn't in the text. This seems to me like one of the largest kind of interventions that we've had in the story, because there is a little like hiatus, there is a little sort of gap in the story there. Not saying it's not justified, but that is to me one of the most interesting things about this section, is that really this whole interlude, like of them visiting Brethil, is not at all in the text.
Correct. The text says that Beren never spoke with another mortal after he returns from the dead, but throughout the story of the quest, he never speaks to another mortal after he leaves Dorthonion with his father's death.
Right.
So once he meets Luthien, he's only interacting with elves. So we've introduced this interlude to give him a chance to interact with mortals post meeting Luthien, but pre-death.
Pre-death. Right. So we're holding to the he never speaks to a mortal again after he returns from the dead, but actually, in a sense, giving that greater weight by, sort of establishing and reestablishing those connections there.
Yes. And one of the main things you wanted this episode to do was to show the reconciliation between Luthien and Thingol. Mm-hmm. And part of what he had done was ban mortals from Doriath. And so we wanted to show what his reconciliation would look like in accepting not just Beren, but his whole family. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's part of why we had to meet the family now, so that we could have that reconciliation by the end.
Right. Because yes, it isn't just about Beren. I mean, and of course, this is something that's going to bears fruit in the text afterwards with his welcome of Turin, right?
Correct.
That we are told that Thingol's heart has changed towards mortals. So it's a thing we know happens, but it kind of happens off stage in the text, right? So I do think it is interesting to kind of take that element, which we're told at the beginning that he doesn't want mortals in there, right? So I mean, Tolkien provides that whole frame. Thingol is anti-mortal, then Beren comes and makes it worse, and then Thingol has a change of heart by the end of Beren's career, and now he's like pro-human. Thingol is, by the time we get to Turin. So that is a legitimate narrative arc that Tolkien provides, but he only provides it in these tiny little references here and there. So it does make sense to me to kind of sit there a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, converting something from a narrative where the narrator can tell you after the fact what happened or what people were thinking is like, we have to actually have scenarios and scenes play out where those things happen.
Right. And another thing that I'm a big fan of in general here, just making sure that we are taking the time, that like our viewers would take the time to understand the significance of the Beren and Luthien story, right? Yeah. It's a big deal, but there are ways in which if Tolkien didn't tell you so, right? That is like, if it weren't for the fact that everybody keeps referring back to the Beren and Luthien story, if you just read the Beren and Luthien story by itself, you might and you might not realize you were reading like the most important, momentous story in the whole mythology, right? I mean, I'm not saying there's nothing there that gives you a hint about that, but think about the significance of the Lord of the Rings characters' contemplations back over the Beren and Luthien story, and how that informs our own, reading of that, our own understanding of that, our own reflections on it. Obviously the action, the reclaiming of the Silmaril, the going into Angband. I mean, that would have remained a great and heroic action, no matter what. But there's a bunch of standalone great heroic actions like that. Fingon's rescue of Maedhros is a great heroic action. Yeah. not wholly dissimilar from that, right? Again, what Luthien and Beren did is a bigger deal than that, but still, it seems like it's, it's in the ballpark anyway, right? But there's a
Certainly.
significance to it. There's a much greater weight to it, and I like leaning into that, especially with the Athrobeth we just did in the previous season, and really kind of showing how, making it clear why this is not just a story because like the characters, this is not just an important story because the characters are more awesome, or because the things that are accomplished here are greater and more difficult than,
in fact, Beren is significantly less awesome than a lot of the people that we've been following up until this point.
Yes.
And I think that really this vindicates the concept of the show, the imaginary show that we've been creating, right? Because like you'll hear people say, well, you couldn't make the Silmarillion into a film, but you could make individual films about the story. So you could do like the Beren and Luthien film, and sure, you could do that, but it would not have nearly like it. You wouldn't get the significance of the story. Because like, and maybe you could get like, some awesome narrator come in and tell the audience about, long ago before men awoke in the crafting of the Silmarils, and Morgoth took them and put them in his crown, and but it meant no human, and then the huge hit you over the head foreshadowing of, and no human has ever been married to an elf, and blah 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 blah, right? You could do all that. But again, the narration is hitting the audience on the head with the very thing that we're going to talk about in the story. And B, there's no comparison between the weight that, as you say, that is conveyed by that versus conveyed by 4 13-hour seasons of television, not including what we have up until this point.
Right.
Like, the audience has now been with us for longer than the Rings of Power is slated to be.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
By this point that we're at right now. So the weight, the power of this story really gets to mean something.
What is it, 65 episodes prior to the beginning of season 6, right? So it's a lot of time, and right. I agree exactly. I mean, I think,
and so we're now at 76 hours.
Yeah, right, exactly. By the time we get to here, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I think that because you're right, the Beren and Luthien story is, I mean, I've heard people say that too, right? Like Beren and Luthien would make a great standalone film, and I'm like, it kind of would, and it kind of wouldn't. I still think like Turin would make a good standalone film. Horrible, but
it would. Sure, it would be I can see that it would be a great movie, but it would be a great movie about this couple and the awesome thing they do together. It wouldn't be about, watch the love of these two people literally break the universe.
Right. Yep. Yeah, no, it would be very hard to convey the weight of that, the weight that it has. It really, I do think almost more than any other of the stories in the Legendarium, it draws its power from the larger story it's embedded in,
because otherwise all you have is a nice fairy story with some mythological elements, and it is right. Of course it's that.
Yeah, and the even the forbidden love angle of the story sounds like, out of context, sounds like every other forbidden love story. Might as well be the Montagues and the Capulets, right?
Exactly.
There's a Polynesian one where the guy is told that you can only marry the daughter of the chieftain if you go and fetch the moon. So he runs and fetches the moon by stealing it from somebody and bringing it back. And I'm like, reading that scenario, it's like, okay, got to go steal Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Sounds just like you have to go fetch the moon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same story.
It's the same story. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's, but yeah, this is why but this is just back to why I think this episode is awesome. The kind of payoff that's involved, and the reason why I'm so glad that we're doing this episode this way. I mean, I really, really like this design, because what we're doing here is like right before the wedding, we are making sure we are taking the time to say, let's all remember, let's all be conscious of what this means. This is a huge deal, much huger than, again, back to forbidden love, whatever the obstacle may be, whether it's cultural taboos like the Polynesian story that you're talking about there, like that kind of thing, and that's involved here too, right? Or whether it's just, forbidden love like Romeo and Juliet, as I was just alluding to, right? Still, the tendency is merely to, like, if you do as a viewer get invested in this, you tend to be just invested in overcoming the obstacle, right? The obstacle to the love relationship is just the thing to be overcome. So, hey, yeah, great. Like, the father is hostile. Okay, right? There are, cultural taboos. One's an elf, one's a human. We can overcome that, right? Yeah, hooray. Look, they're overcoming that. Great. Enemy slain, obstacle surmounted, right? Now they live happily ever after or something, right? But this is not that story. And to stop and think, and of course, and that's the interesting thing. Think of the way that Aragorn, with admitted bias, talks about this story in The Fellowship of the Ring, right? And the way Legolas comes back and talks about that story, right? Yeah. The way that both of them talk about the line of Luthien, and the significance of the line of Luthien, like, something is happening here that, like, the overcoming the thing, it's not just an obstacle to true love, right, that is being overcome. These two are just about to change the world, right? The question that the Athrobeth left, right, the question that was left hanging in season 5 was, is it possible to bridge that gap? Can the hands reach across the chasm and clasp each other? And Beren and Luthien are here to say yes. And from here, like, we're already in the middle of it, but really from here is where it gets real in talking about, and what happens when that occurs, right? How does that, this is not just a, like, good on them for overcoming, prejudice or whatever, and, making the relationship work out, right? This is, and now the world is changed, and how is it gonna be changed? And yeah, getting the weight of that. So getting the weight of that, it is so worth it, taking some time. And for this reason, it does seem to me, in the context of this, it is, I think it's such a wonderful idea to bring the mortals back. Like, let's go back among mortals first before we return to that. Because by doing that, we can really see and feel and taste what the consequences of this are, And of course, we know, Beren and Luthien don't necessarily, but we know that this is Beren saying goodbye. He is soon to die, and then have interesting things happen to him after that. But he's the way in which his like farewell to mortals here, to mortal society, is he's going to return to Faerie, right? He's going to go back to Doriath, which is like going back to the realm of Faerie. He's going to return to Faerie, and he will never come back from that. He will never return. He is on a one-way street, and his mom seems to sense that, right? I mean, she can tell that that's what this means, that that's what this is about. And even Andreth, who has a better understanding of all of this than anybody else here, even she doesn't fully understand what it's going to mean, because she never, I mean, if you'd asked her, I'm sure she'd say she would have liked to have a go at finding out what it meant. But but that was one of the problems with her and Ignor, right? Is that she saw it as merely a barrier to love that could have been overcome, right? To some extent, like that was part of the sort of drama. I'm not thinking here of the Athrobeth conversation with Finrod specifically, but of her romance with Ignor and Ignor walking away from it later on, and her lack of understanding, like her just not being able to really fully comprehend why it was that Ignor walked away from that relationship. Anyway, yeah, it is so rich to return to all these things and think through all these things. So, all right, but let's talk more about this stuff. So we get Emeldir, which again, so much payoff. I just like, Emeldir is always one of those characters who has always been on my short list of characters that I wish I'd gotten to know better. Because, she gets like that one mention, and the one mention is pretty cool. Like when she takes the refugees and she takes charge and she leads them off and saves their lives. And I'm like, can I get more of her story? Like I always felt that, when reading the Silmarillion. So, it's fun. I know that we don't, to some extent, we're still not really doing justice to Emeldir's character. We're not really we're visiting her again, which is nice. We saw a little bit more of her before than we again the published Silmarillion for sure. We're coming back to see her again, which is nice. But tell me about Emeldir and what you guys were trying to do with her character when Beren's mom comes into this, because of course that's a fascinating correspondence, right? We've got the issues with Luthien's parents now being able to bring, Beren's parents, or at least one of Beren's parents, into this situation is, I think, a really cool sort of framework for the wedding episode. So tell me more about Emeldir.
Yeah, so there's a handful of female characters that exist in Brethil right now that we see throughout this episode. And one thing they all have in common is that they will lose their husband to these wars. Mm-hmm. And Emeldir, of course, has already lost her husband in Dorthonion to the fallout from the Dagor Bagalak.
Yeah.
Rian will lose her husband in the Nirnaeth, as will Glorithel, the current Lady of Brethil. Right. And then Andreth lost Ignor as well. Not her husband, but her person she cared about.
Yes.
Would have liked to have been a husband.
Wasn't her husband, but that wasn't her fault. So yeah.
Right, exactly.
Not for lack of trying.
Yeah, not for lack of trying on her part. So we see all of these women interacting either with each other or with Beren and Luthien throughout the episode, and getting little glimpses of how they feel about this. And this is the first time we've seen Emeldir since the death of her husband, and technically this is her getting news of the death of her husband. It's been a few years. She knows he's gone.
Yeah.
But Beren's the one who was there and saw it, and this is the first time Beren has reunited with his mother since that time. Yeah. So part of her reaction to Beren and Luthien is her own fairly fresh grief over the loss of her husband. It's not, like I said, it's not news, but she's just got confirmation for the first time. So it's brought it all back up again. Yeah. And so she's looking at this and trying to spare her son some of the grief that she thinks is coming his way really soon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you look at a mortal marries an elf and you're like, oh, the elf is going to have to deal with the grief because obviously the mortal's going to die. That's how mortals work. Right. But she's looking at it as, my son will never be accepted by the elves. Right. He'll always be this stranger in whatever her family's society and culture is. He's never going to be good enough from anyone's point of view. Possibly not his soon-to-be wife's. Like, sure, she thinks he's cool now when he's young and healthy. Well, mostly healthy. He's missing a hand now, but so she sees that they genuinely care about each other. She doesn't disapprove of the relationship, but she's just worried and concerned. And so we wanted to show a resistance to them that was going to feel very different from Thingol's.
Mm-hmm.
Thingol's very much comes across as pride and possessiveness because
Yeah.
it is.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
my daughter's too good for you, go away. And this is a little bit more of a, I've been hurt. I don't want to see him get hurt any worse than he has to be. Like, I see that no matter how this goes, he's going to get hurt now.
Right. Right.
But I'd like to like contain that in some way, and it's not going to be contained.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she eventually comes to accept that this is the path he's on, and this is how it's going to be, and he's just going to have to face that fate. So it's a more mellowed resistance. Like, she doesn't hate Luthien. She doesn't think anything ill of Luthien. She thinks Luthien's wonderful.
Right. Who doesn't?
She just has these concerns, and so that's kind of the story we were trying to tell with Emeldir here.
Yeah. Another thing about it is, like, if to go back to the theoretical standalone movie Beren and Luthien, Beren is this person with nobody attached to him that comes out of the forest, right? Because I can't, like, how do you tell the, like, even if you told the outlaws and Dorthonian story, they wouldn't be characters, they wouldn't matter, right? You wouldn't spend enough time with them because you want to get onto the story. And so for what we are doing here, essentially reasserts the fact that Beren is a real person with people with prior attachments, with attachments indeed outside of Luthien.
Right.
Like, she is not the only person in his world, even now.
Yeah.
Right. And so there is a cost even to his decision to stay with her. And and he's not the only person paying that cost.
And that last thing is completely is easy utterly to overlook.
Yes.
He is, the story presents him as alone, right? I mean, after the death of his father and the rest of the outlaws, and he's by himself, doesn't even have a dog in the text. So he's alone in Dorthoni, and then wanders, ragged and alone into the. In other words, Beren he has nothing and no one until he has Luthien, right? And that's really the core of his story. For the rest of the time. But yes, I agree. He does still have a living mom. Even in the text, his mom is still alive. Right. And
we're not encouraged to remember her, but
no, we're not. Nor are we encouraged to ask the question, which is a question to be asked. Like, wait, shouldn't you be the leader of your people now? Mightn't it be something like, might somebody somewhere think it's actually your responsibility to go find the remnant of your people and, like, lead them or something, right? But it never.
But no, because Emeldir's got it.
Emeldir's got it. Yeah, it's fine.
Which I think that the times that we call back to her help reaffirm that, so that the audience is not invited to at any point ask, well, why isn't Beren going and leading his own people? Because they're fine. They have their own leader. He's not, his services are no longer required.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. But again, we don't ever see or really know that. I mean, all we get is that one picture of Emeldir leading them to safety. Right. But yeah, the question is, I don't think the text ever even asks that question. Like, why doesn't Beren go back to his people or something? Like, it's really not, the text is not interested in that question as the story is presented to us. But I still I think it's a perfectly fair question to ask, and a really interesting one. And yeah, I mean, I love the things you guys are emphasizing. I think that here's another one of the things that I think is so easy to overlook, and that this situation that you guys have crafted here really helps to draw attention to it, to not just pass it over. And that is, the whole mortal man marries not only an elf woman, but an elf princess, and not just any elf princess, but, the alpha elf princess in the history of the world, right? there's men almost always marry up in Tolkien's world, often way up, of course, and this is, of course, one of the most famous and most significant examples of that. But I think it's perfectly fair to consider, when you're considering the human marries an elf, like 90% of the attention tends to be focused on, like, think about even in the Lord of the Rings movie. Right, in the Lord of the Rings movie, we got so much more of Arwen than we get in the book, right? Understandably. And much more of, like, Arwen and Elrond and the whole, like, oh, are you going to marry a mortal and what are the consequences? And all of that's perfectly appropriate. Like, it's very right. But notice, not a single person ever really asks the other question. Well, Aragorn, you're going to marry an elf. Like, are you sure that's going to be okay? Like, are you, like, it's like so many people assume that, like, well, marrying an elf is obviously awesome, right? Like, that's like winning the lottery. So you don't, you don't ask questions about that. Like, everyone's just high-fiving you, right? If you're in that position. But it's not as simple as that. And so I think that, again, really creating this situation where we're thinking that through and saying there are consequences on both sides. This does, and to get that other view of things, this idea, the one thing that I'm not saying I regret it in the sense that I think we should make it happen, but the one thing which almost happens in this episode, and, like, might be too much fun even to attempt, would be to, like, have Emeldir there at the wedding, like Thingol and Emeldir on either side, like, both looking askance at each other, like, I'm not sure what I'm getting for in-laws here. Like, there are two different perspectives. In some ways, of course, it's reminding me briefly of the Gilrain Elrond thing we were doing way back in season 1. But anyway, I guess I'm not suggesting it. I just think it would be fun.
I think we actually do have her at the it's in here. Men of Brethil, including Emeldir, present.
Okay, so
she's
there at
there
the wedding.
Yes,
Fantastic.
and if you think about it, like, how I just think, like, think about my mom and how she would react if she found out that my father-in-law sent me on a suicide mission.
Yes.
She would be enraged. She'd be livid. Like, how dare you?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it really brings home, like, how obnoxious.
Yes.
And
like,
callous this thing is.
The wonderful nonverbal exchange, right? Of Thingol being like, here I am being all gracious and allowing you peon humans into my kingdom, and even more graciously, I can't believe you can possibly thank me enough for allowing your son to marry my daughter. And Emeldir looking at him like something she just scraped off the bottom of her shoe. Because
here I am being gracious enough to not murder you on the spot.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we do have time, no, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time in the beginning of the next episode for interactions at, like, the wedding party. At the end of this episode, all we have is just a very brief scene showing that the wedding is taking place. So we'll show Emeldir there and we'll show Thingol there. So if you want to call out a very specific expression on Emeldir's face during all of this, we can do that.
See, it's hard because it's hard for me to imagine a scene, like, it would become a bigger deal. Like, it would be hard to, I mean,
it might be better to have a verbal interaction in the next episode at the wedding party. Because there is going to be, obviously, you can't just have a wedding. There has to be a party after the wedding.
Yeah.
You can't just invite your human in-laws to travel all this way and not throw a big party for them.
Yeah,
right.
You need a good reception. You gotta. It's too bad that your best DJ's out of town, but
right. But you throw a big party, and then, in traditional Tolkien fashion, some horrible monster busts in and interrupts it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that will be for next episode.
Yeah.
But in that social setting, it's possible that Emeldir and Thingol could exchange some words, and that her words could be tinged with frostiness for some
It's
reason.
hard because like I kind of feel like Emeldir she does not strike me as a word mincing type, right? And it's hard for me to see how, like, if they interact with each other verbally, how she could say anything that would not like be actionable or like yeah. I mean, what's Thingol gonna say or do if Emeldir comes and is like, "Oh, the man who tried to murder my son. Yes, nice to meet you." Like, it's, I mean, if she gives him even the smallest piece of her mind, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a politically awkward situation.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Right. We do need the men to be invited back.
Yes,
right.
Yes. But so I think that most of what's going to happen in the next episode is going to be subtext. Even then. But
even just like Emeldir showing restraint, right? To but yeah, I could like, at the very least, I could see her like giving Thingol the cut direct at the reception, just like she's refusing to talk to him.
Yeah, she's gonna show up with Narsil on her hip with like just white knuckling it the entire time.
Yes. Oh man, I mean it's yeah. Well, but it'll be interesting. Well, okay. Well, now I'm poaching onto next episode, which I shouldn't do. But
probably.
But yes, it does raise the question, Marie, that you just raised. Like, not only, in theory, their interaction not only has to not scuttle the whole idea of Thingol. Like, Thingol has to go away from this not only not thinking, well, that was a mistake, I'm never inviting humans into Doriath again, but it should, in some way, like, contribute to his change of mind about it. And so that would be sort of the challenge, I think, for any Emeldir reaction. But
it's possible that we can have her interact with Melian and be much more willing to interact with Melian. Yes. And Thingol could just not notice that the mother of the groom is not cool with him because, Beren's father's dead. So that's why he's not here. So if Thingol feels like, I feel like there's someone else I should be talking to at this party. Oh, right. His dad's dead. Okay, never mind. Right. So we might be able to pull that off if she's cordial to Melian.
Right.
Because obviously it's not Melian's fault that the quest happened.
No, it's not Melian's fault. Though Emeldir might not fully appreciate that, perhaps, but
Beren does tell her things in this episode, and that's how she gets the story out of him of what's going on.
Right.
So we at least get Beren's perspective on the quest passed on to Emeldir.
Yeah. By the way, I keep thinking about the enormously complicated emotional reaction Emeldir must have when Beren arrives.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, first of all, as you said, it's confirmation of the dad's death, but she has to have been assuming Beren was dead for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So like, holy cow, my son is alive. Oh wait, except he's dying, right?
And he's missing a hand. And who's she?
I mean, like, oh my goodness, really, really complex emotional situation for Emeldir here. So tell me about I feel like I'm well, it's not poaching because it's in this episode, but let's kind of skim over and do these things as well. Here we are. Yes, Emeldir and her mixed feelings. Tell me about since we have a bunch of different human characters here, right? We have Emeldir, we have Andreth, aged. This is 80-year-old Andreth, right? We have
I think she's 78 technically, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. We have Rian, right, who is sort of the spokesperson of the younger generation, and another one that glimpse of the bereavement, right, of the loss of the the outlaws. And we also have what's her name, the Haladin woman.
Glorithel.
Glorithel, yeah.
So that's
So we get these different, all female, because it's a predominantly female crew there because this was the wives and children that were sent off, right?
Well,
Yeah.
and any
Not
men in the
breath- not
army,
that- yeah.
any men in the army who didn't join the Outlaws in Dorthonion, which remember was only a very small band,
right.
are here too as refugees, which
Right.
is part of the tension.
But the entire male leadership team
Is gone,
died.
which is why
Right.
Emeldir's in charge.
Not Yeah, because not only did Barry here die, but also Balagund and Baragund, right?
Yeah.
That's the right
Belagund and Baragund, yeah.
Balagund. Yeah, I
Balagund
keep
and
mixing up
Baragund, yeah.
which vowel goes with the L and which vowel goes with the R.
Yes.
Yes. But they're gone, and Bregolas is dead, and his presumably all of the guys that died with him were like their elder statesmen. So like their entire male leadership team gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Baron's the sole survivor, and which is why now like Emeldir and Andrith are completely in charge, and anybody that they're talking to is generally going to be enough of the feminine persuasion. Yes.
Yeah. So do we get among all of the voices, the human voices that we get in this camp in this episode, do we have anyone who is articulating an anti-elf perspective? Like anyone who just distrusts elves generally?
We didn't want to redo Thingol's storyline with a human character that wasn't that important.
Right.
Like, I'm sure there are people in Brethel who are slightly distrustful of elves, but they're going to just avoid talking to the elf who's there and look at her funny. Like they don't have a story.
Right.
Yeah. I was just...
Unless there's somebody you were thinking of. That
it's also hard to bring somebody in just to hold the jerk ball.
Just to be a jerk.
For the episode,
Yeah. What I was thinking of was not to create a temporary jerk, but to articulate some mouthpiece for the I don't think marrying an elf is necessarily a picnic kind of perspective. The idea that Beren, for somebody to, I would think that there would be humans who would look with disapproval on what Beren is doing. And I don't know.
If we want Gloridel's husband to express, he's the actual leader of the Haladin. She's the lady of the Haladin.
Right.
But if we wanted him to pull Beren aside and say something, we could.
It doesn't have to
he's
be
the one who's been
unadulterated bigotry necessarily.
Right. That's the thing is, what do you want said if you're only going to get that one line?
Well, honestly, even Emeldir can say something to the effect of look, how they don't really treat us as equals.
Right. Yeah. I would think there could easily be even against someone who's not just a jerk, some kind of perfectly rational loyalty, patriotic feelings in a sense. Nick, like you were saying, they think themselves all high and mighty, right?
Right.
They look down on us and treat us like pets. Again, not all of them and not all of the time. And I'm not saying that all elves are evil, but there's this.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah. Are you exactly this is not. There are lots of reasons why this would not. I mean, again, it's intuitive to think of the reasons why might be a bad idea for an elf to marry a human, right?
Right.
But there are reasons the other direction as well, and to really not only do you realize the family you're marrying into, right? Not just that, because that's a factor, right? They'll never accept you. They're going to look down on you. You're going to spend the rest of your life being treated as, a freak, basically, like this, as if Luthien had found, tamed, and then mysteriously married a particularly, intelligent forest animal, right? I mean, like it's I mean, always again, you could easily see how the humans would, how his mom might worry that that's how they're going to look at him, right? Because he's so far below them, and they think so highly of themselves, right?
Yeah.
Right. So Emeldir and Andreth do have a conversation about this, where Emeldir might have been more careful what she said directly to her son. She's not trying to alienate him,
right,
when she just got reunited with him.
Right.
But she is concerned, and so she starts talking to Andreth and wants to say, this is something that's never been done before. Humans and elves have never married each other. I don't know what my son's doing. So in that conversation, she could express some of these things.
Right.
Of course, the turn of the conversation is when Andreth's going to say, well,
right, actually,
Yeah.
and tell the story with Agnar, which
since you mention it,
yeah, and Emeldir had no idea,
right,
that had happened, and so it puts the context of, wait, this has happened before, and it didn't end great for Andreth, but it's not completely as unheard of as you might think, and Andreth can see how a human might decide that it's worth it to try to marry an elf.
She can put herself into that imaginative position. So the sorry, a funny thought just occurred to me in the middle of this. Remember how salty Andreth is in the Afterbeth, right?
Yes.
Emeldir could quote her, like one of her sayings about the elves, because she's like that. You could easily pull a direct quote from Andreth in the first half of the Athrobeth, and that's exactly the kind of anti-elf human sentiment that I have in mind, right?
Yes.
So
okay, that's
she,
it. Yeah.
Like,
so I think the voice that you're looking for is Emeldir, but she can't say it to Beren. She has to say it to Andreth.
Yeah, and she could bring it up to Andreth, thinking that she has a sympathetic audience.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I remember you used to say that, like, the firstborn, like the way they treat us, and they can't, and that, it's not. Again, like all of the, I get quoting from the early parts of the Athrobeth, and then have Andreth say, "There's
and we were
here
supposed
you don't know."
And remember, this is Emeldir, right? Like, so having her think in terms of, and they said that we were going to fight this battle together against the Dark Lord, and then he came, and where were they?
Right.
Crickets.
Yeah.
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 I mean, granted, if they stayed in Nargothrond, then at least it would have been marching with the army up in there, but then they probably would all have died, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. The happy thing is remembering the fact that no matter where they had stayed, they would pretty much all end up dead sooner or later anyway. So it's
a very happy thought. Yes,
it is. It is.
Trying to play what if with the first age is
you just can't get it to turn out well.
Right.
It's almost like it's supposed to happen this way.
But then they all die anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
but
the little bits of catastrophe that do fit into the story are obviously much more frequent in the Beren and Luthien story, and we do get to see how providentially some of these things did work out. But Emeldir's not going to see that right now. So she's concerned for her son.
Yeah. No, so I agree. That's the conversation where this really should come out. And again, one of the goals is both to really make sure it's clear what is at stake, humanly speaking, right? Like why this is a big deal, and not just, this is not just Beren winning the lottery. This is Beren stepping out and taking a risk, which is taking as big a leap as Luthien is taking, right? And we talked about Rian. We should be a little bit more, at the risk of giving more spoilers, we should be a little bit more explicit. I do love the way that you were setting up Rian. Rian is the one who's just going to die of grief after Húr's death. And so this, I found that a very, very poignant scene when Beren is talking about the death of her father, and he's trying to emphasize the, what he accomplished and how great of a hero he was, and Rian simply saying, but that means he never came home, right? And that's a really powerful anticipation of Rian's reaction to the death of Huor at the end of the Near Ninth. So just wanted to note that. I think that's a brilliant, as I say, there's so much payoff in both directions in this episode. It's so good.
And obviously what we're trying to set up is that Luthien's about to lose her brand new husband in a violent action where he's out being a hero. So her experience is about to match the women in the story that we've just met here.
Yeah.
And I
mean... right. Maybe you should notice the fact, maybe you should pay more attention to how many widows you are talking to right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, technically it's only Emeldir, but...
Technically it's only one widow, yeah.
But the grief is a little bit more pervasive, and the pattern is there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Much premonition of imminent widowhood.
Right. Everyone gets to be a widow. Yeah.
Everyone gets to be a widow. That's right. Welcome to the first stage. Yes.
And it's, hang on. Does the book describe whether Luthien, human Luthien, or Beren die first?
No. It's they die in the same year.
Wouldn't that be ironic though? If she passed before him,
or if he outlives her, yes,
right?
It's kind of implied because she dies a year after she gets the Noglamir.
Yeah,
and it says that hastened her end in the text. Now, whether that's just because, wow, she died like just a year later, what happened, or not, but it's possible she goes first.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. So. Yep. You know what's going to be fun? Not skipping that scene. Like actually telling the end of the Beren and Luthien story is going to be really, really interesting. Yeah. But that is a later problem or a later opportunity. Tell me more about the healing business, because there was a great deal of emphasis laid on, I mean, obviously he needs to be healed, right? He's just had his hand bitten off. And the wound is not even just going septic, right? The wound is there actually like venom in play, or is it just like a hideous infection?
Yeah, there's poison from the bite.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be an infection that's causing the poison. I don't know the details of magic werewolf bites.
Right. I think
I know he doesn't turn into a werewolf, but
right.
That's all I can assure you.
I think that the important thing here is that once again we see the dichotomy between what Luthien is able to do to help versus what she can't. Right? So she needs them to help deal with the actual wound and the normal mundane sort of things that occur as a result of a sudden and violent amputation. But there's also the evil magic of Karkaroth's spirit acting on the flesh, and perhaps there's some sort of like
a little necrosis going on there.
Yeah, he's taken some necrotic damage, right? In addition to the regular damage. On top of that, there's layered a little bit of necrotic damage, right? It's an ongoing effect.
Is it gangrenous?
Ugh.
Is there putrefaction? There are so many fun words related to this to this situation.
So here's the deal. Recall when we were talking about
Corey, we're not allowed to have like horror things in this show, remember?
We can't do that. I see.
Yeah, we're not allowed.
I see. We draw the line at gangrene.
Yeah, no, it's not that. It's that. So in the earlier episode when he was shot by an arrow,
the infection,
and she had to heal him, she was getting a little flustered because he doesn't heal up like an elf does.
Right.
So all her experience of medicine and healing is not something that applies to mortal humans. And so she was a little concerned about his recovery there. And it worked out fine. Huan helped her out. Everything was good. Yay, Beren back on his feet. Here, she knows that she has that limitation. So she lets the humans take over at first, being like, look, you guys know how human bodies work. Go for it. Save him from whatever's happening with that dance. And then as she sees what the problem is and that there is something that elven medicine can help with, then she steps in to try to deal with the whatever effect Karkaroth left behind, whether it is poison or venom or gangrene or an evil spirit or whatever. Like it's a magic werewolf bite. So she has to undo the evil magic of the werewolf bite.
Yeah.
That sounds like a thing elvish medicine takes care of, right?
It
like,
does.
Yeah.
It does. Sounds like something very all ready to be cured by Luthien's song, basically.
Exactly. So she just
sounds
needs
like
to
something
put
you could heal by dancing.
Right. So she just has to put the final touch on the healing process. But the humans did all the typical things you do to take care of an amputation, which would involve, I mean, eventually they're going to want the skin to grow over the wound. So you have to make sure you're not letting it heal too quickly because you don't want it to get too tight, right? You want it to be able to grow and extend over the wound and everything. So there's a lot of steps you do to gradually heal an amputation and not just instantly sew it up and say, all right, you're done.
Right.
And I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what that is, but I know there's a process.
Right.
And we also talked about having the Haladin being kind of like, is she a witch? Because she kind of seems like a witch.
Right.
And you know, whereas the Baorians are like, they've lived none of these people have lived among the elves, but they understand
it's part of their culture.
Right.
They understand that there's an element of this.
Right. So Emeldir's fine with what's going on. She's not like, what is this witch doing to my son?
Right.
In the scene.
Right. This is not her concern. She has concerns about her son, but it's not to do with his healing. Yeah.
Right. So if anything, we were
Little witch.
Yes. We were trying to show that everyone's working together to make this happen. And despite some pretty strong cultural differences and who are you and where did you come from, that they're seeing in each other something that they find that they can trust. Right. So Luthien can trust the healing skills of the humans that she's found herself among to save Beren. Like, that's obviously really important to her right now. Right. And she's trusting them to do it. Like, and Emeldir is seeing the care that she's taking with Beren. Like, okay, they do love each other. She really does love him, not what is she doing hanging around my son kind of thing. So we were trying to start it out in a place of trust. She has
honorable intentions towards her son.
Exactly. So we're just trying to establish that there's some mutual trust going on, and it's not all bad news. But a few people want to talk about a few things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of people talking about a few things, what do we? And obviously, this is a sort of a final decision moment for Beren and Luthien, right? We worked out how are they understanding their relationship and what are they going to do situation back in episode 9, right? So to some extent, we get a little bit of a redux of that, right, in this episode. Okay, so we kind of got the Silmarillion, we kind of don't have the Silmaril, so now where are we, right? Are we done? Can we retire? You know, do we go back to Thingol or not? So how are you guys sort of, well, one simple way to ask the question, how is it different? Like, how are we presenting how this situation, like, how is this not going to sound like the same conversation they already had?
Exactly. How many times are Beren and Luthien going to have the conversation of, I have to complete the quest so that I can win your father's approval. And she says, no, we can just dance in the woods by ourselves
Right.
forever.
Right.
That's fine too.
Right.
And the answer is about 4 times. And so,
Right.
so this is not the last time they have this conversation, but it is about the last time. And the one difference is that there is no more quest. The quest is over. And
Right.
apparently it has ended in failure. So just like the Orpheus Eurydice situation you got going on behind you, that doesn't end well. Like, that is an unsuccessful attempt at winning Silmarils or daughters or whatever they are that you're winning.
Yes.
I think I lost my metaphor. So they failed. And so Beren has now failed his quest, lost his hand, and has nothing. And therefore, the conversation is not complete the quest and win Thingol's approval, but more, can we throw ourselves on Thingol's mercy and just go back and ask him for his blessing anyway without the quest?
Right.
And they've kind of already said that, because that was where part of what they were talking over in episode 9. So again, still rehashing, but now with the failed quest and the
right. And they hadn't even made the attempt then.
Right. So it was like, are we going to attempt it or not? And then they obviously attempted it. They're like, okay, we tried that. We did that. We're done with that.
Right. So what are their attitudes towards I mean, is Beren feeling like a failure? I mean, I could easily imagine him taking it on himself, right? Like, they got in there.
Yeah.
She cast Morgoth into slumber, for crying out loud, and he like got the Silmaril and then like fumbled it at the end, right?
Yeah, it just got ripped right out of his arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right. Technically not ripped out of his hand, right? But of course. But yeah, I mean, so is he down on himself about this?
Yes.
I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah.
So, in the Neverending Story, there's the Rockbiter character, and he's like, these look like big, strong hands,
yes.
don't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's that of like, I had it in my hand, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And obviously that character is quite depressed in the Neverending Story. Beren, of course, has his mom sitting next to his bedside, and he's got Luthien with him. So he's not at that level of might as well just give up now.
Right.
But he is feeling a bit like a failure. So he needs to heal his wound, but he also needs to recover his spirits to be willing to do anything as his next step. So in the first part of this episode, he's not doing much. He's passed out and or sitting there getting better. So but when his mom starts questioning him about this quest and is all like, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing all this stuff?
Yeah.
He had to get a bit defensive,
right.
Not only of his own actions, but of like, no, Luthien helped me so much. And, the Elf Lord Finrod was a great help too before he got himself killed. And, so he's being defensive of the actions he's taken to get to this point, and a bit of clearly this was my fate and my destiny, and people have worked so hard to get me to this point. I can't stop now. So in going over the journey he's been through, he kind of recovers enough of his spirit to be willing to continue moving forward.
Right. And I think that there's also a point of, can his defensiveness kind of reveal a certain amount of doubt? Because, like, I thought my fate was either to gain the Silmaril or die trying, and here I am, having had neither of those things happen.
Yes.
Neither of those things has been accomplished. So maybe I was wrong about what my fate was, because here I sit without a Silmaril and alive.
Yeah. That's where he has to fall back on Finrod.
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to ask next. The resolution in episode 9, and remind me, because it was several weeks ago and I've already forgotten half of it. They had the two different perspectives, right, which they both had to come to, and so they were at cross purposes because they were both thinking about it from a different perspective and prioritizing different things. His prioritization was on like his doom, right? Like it is my doom. Like he's the one who had like the vision of like it has been laid upon me. I have to do this. This not just because of like stubborn pride, like I swore I would and I'm not going to give up no matter what, and not just because of like, you know, cultural necessity, like, well, I have to get the approval of the father of the bride and I can only do that if I get a Silmaril, so no matter what I have to do it. But this higher like this sense of like no, there is a higher destiny at play here. This I don't know why, but this, you know, I don't fully understand it, but this is bigger than me. This is bigger even than just the two of us and our relationship. This is something that has to happen, that has to be done. What was the other side? That's what I'm forgetting. I remember that part. What was her perspective?
Luthien's perspective was, why can't we just go dance in the woods?
Yeah.
I was real good with the dancing in the woods part.
But whatever we're going to do, we're going to do it together.
Whatever we're going to do, we're going to do it together. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And that question is completely answered at this point.
Right.
There's no point. Yeah.
Yeah, they are together. And that's the part where Emeldir knows she's too late to change this direction.
Right.
Like her son's engaged. So it's very clear that decision has been made. And so she's not trying to split them up. Mm-hmm. Just she's trying to save him his pain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my big question then is, how does Beren especially, but both of them really, but Beren especially, process the failure of the quest in the context of that or to say the same thing another way, how has his vision of the destiny, of their destiny, and, you know, the doom that is laid upon them changed in the context of the loss of the Silmaril, right? I mean, if he one of the kind of the dramas with Beren here that, like, as they return to this conversation here, again, they're not at cross purposes anymore. As you say, that question of like, whatever we do, we're going to do together, has been resolved. But I would think that there would be a little bit of a crisis of the vision of that destiny, the vision of doom, right? I thought that this doom was laid upon me, right? And I now accept that it's us, right? This doom was laid upon us to go and get the Silmaril or die trying. And now, Nick, as you say, neither one of those things has happened, right? We don't have the Silmaril and we didn't die trying. So what does that mean? Have we failed in our destiny? If returning with a Silmaril, if bringing a Silmaril back was not, in fact, the destiny that lay before us, then what is the point of us? Like, why, what should we go do? What can we, what is still to be achieved? Have we already failed?
Episode 13 is to be achieved.
Right, but he doesn't know that.
But, but this is Beren's perspective, and he can only see what he's already seen.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that my interpretation of this is that Beren is kind of like, okay, maybe we could just always live on the run, and like, that's not great, and I'm sorry about that, and I feel really bad about it. But you know, you're right. You know, we whatever we're gonna do, we're gonna get together. And she's basically like, look, I think that at this point, it might be your pride a little bit that's causing us to not try to go back to Doriath and talk to my dad. You know, like, and you know, once that kind of comes out, it's like, okay, all right, that's what we got to do then.
But is that in his mind? Like, what's happening? What's he do? Is he going back to Doriath to beg? Is he going back to Doriath to apologize?
I think he might see it as trying to beg even now until Andreth comes in and delivers her pithy wisdom. But I don't think that Luthien sees it that way at all.
Right. What Luthien wants to do, and what they do at the end, is go back to Doriath and tell the people of Doriath the story of Beren and Luthien.
Right.
She just wants to share the story of the quest. And maybe the point of the quest wasn't getting the Silmaril after all. Maybe it was the story
you made along
the
way.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a very Luthien approach to quest. What is a quest anyway?
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
So that's what she wants to do, and and obviously Beren agrees to this course of action, but it's understood between them that there's some element of throwing themselves on Thingol's mercy here, that if he still says no, there might be consequences. He might put more impediments in their path. He might kick them out of Doriath, never to return, whatever. They don't know what he'll do, but
but I think
it's
at this
possible
point
that it's gonna have a consequence.
I think at this point Luthien can convince Beren that, like, whatever, like, look at what we've accomplished. Whatever my father puts in our way, we're going to overcome.
Right. She's convinced that they're going to be together at the end of this meeting.
Right.
Like, she's not worried. She does not view her father as an obstacle.
Right. Yes. Because let's be real.
Because she is Melion's daughter.
Right. Right. Why would she see anything as an obstacle?
Right.
But when Andreth comes in, and at first I was like, is this too cheesy? But like, it's exactly what Beren does in the book. And so when they're like, well, we're gonna go back, and it's too bad that I told that Thingol that I would return with a Silmaril in my hand, and I clearly don't have that. And Andreth is like, do you not? Right. Yeah. Like, are you sure? Because I heard this story and I'm pretty sure you do. Right.
That's the emphasis of Beren focusing on the I don't have a hand for the whole first part of this.
Right.
Is so that when he's like, oh wait, there's a Silmaril in my hand.
Right. Right. And we don't have to and so anybody with any sense is going to see where this is going, but it's still fun, I think. Is someone else going to give him then what seems to be the sort of obvious pep talk? Right? You didn't fail. You didn't fail in the quest. You achieved the quest. Right. Well, and that's it, because the reality is that he's achieved the quest on a technicality. Like, semantically, he's achieved the quest. Right? And so we didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, just giving Andreth just a line that indicates that this is the solution. Yeah. Right.
Because that's what the hunt for the wolf is for.
Right.
He is gonna fulfill and finish the quest.
Yes.
And he is gonna die trying.
Yes. Right.
So both those things are true. Yay.
Right. Don't worry. It's not that you've achieved neither of them. You've achieved them both. Hooray!
Good job, Ben.
Not yet.
You're an overachiever, not an underachiever.
Right. So that's why we don't want to reassure him now, because we want it to still feel a little bit unfinished. So when he decides, I've got to go hunt that wolf, it'll make sense as a motivation for him that he's trying to finish this quest.
Right. See,
that wolf owes me a hand.
Right, exactly. In the text, it seems to me, it always struck me as almost opposite of that. That like when Beren does the hand thing, there is defiance in Beren there. Like when he's not going back to beg forgiveness. He's not going to Thingol to admit failure. He goes to Thingol and is like, I did the thing. Right. And by doing the hand thing, right, though, holding up the one hand and opening it and holding up the stump, he's not just being like, oh, well, like, I got you. It's technically in my hand. You didn't say my hand had to be here. Right. I mean, his attitude isn't that. He's basically sort of not only saying, not only did I complete the quest, look what I sacrificed in the
Right.
in the like, you should take me the more seriously. And then when Karkaroth comes in,
Right.
it feels more like a, well, crap. I guess the quest is, now it's looking
The
clear
quest
that
caught up with us. Yeah.
the quest, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that he actually thought it was done. That he thought it was achieved, and was ready to go. Like he was ready to
Yeah.
settle down and be fine, be done.
See, I think that what we're saying here is that the quest is not achieved, but that's okay. Look what I like. Luthien is telling you the story of what we've accomplished, and look what I sacrificed for this, as you say, in defiance. But it's Andrith that gives him that, right? The ammunition to do that.
And
Right.
the vibe of the scene with Thingol, yes, Beren can march in there and be defiant and be like, ha, got the quest done. You thought it would kill me. Looks like it didn't. Like he can do all that.
It
But
only
that
killed part of me.
And it's going to finish killing him in a bit. But the interaction there doesn't show much reconciliation with Thingol. Like, yes, we was see Thingol say, oh, okay, I accept Beren as my son-in-law. That is the outcome of that meeting. So being defiant wasn't a bad thing. But there's very little reason for Thingol to show a change of heart in that the way that scene plays out. So it's all, you just have to kind of interpret what's going on. And we wanted to show the audience what's going on. So we had to show Thingol identify with Beren in some way.
Right. The vague impression that I always got from the text is that Thingol's change of heart just comes from him looking on Beren and saying essentially like, dang, that is metal right there.
Right.
Like, new
Yeah,
respect.
okay.
New respect.
Right. Yeah. Thingol as Jack Black is what you're saying.
I'm just that,
Tallest
that the
being ever played by Jack.
casting settled. There you go. But no, the just like that his reaction seems to be like basically like when Beren says like the Silmaril is in his hand, but like my hand is has been severed and yet still holds the Silmaril, and I'm standing here in front of you showing my stomach. Everyone's just like, whoa, street cred through the roof. Like, that's,
yes.
And again, the implication I think is that this is the moment when Thingol realizes that he has massively underestimated Beren personally and humans generally. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But also his daughter.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And
right?
that the love of Beren and Luthien is a thing new and strange. Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. So
the emphasis we put in the scene was that as Luthien is telling the story, Thingol realizes that Beren falling in love with Luthien is not unlike himself falling in love with Melian.
Right.
Like, there's some parallels there.
I love that, by the way. Like, that was one of my other favorite moments of this entire episode, was the exchanged glance between Melian and Thingol. The connection that was right there for him to make originally that he did not make. And it's only now that he sees it.
If ever an elf did not have much grounds for stopping his daughter from marrying a human.
Right. If there ever was anyone who had no ground to stand on in complaining about somebody marrying up, yes. Or to put it the other way around, who had it, to say like, oh no, daughter, don't marry him. He's so far beneath you. You should never marry somebody who's really, really far beneath you. Like, obviously, Thingol no, I love it. Yeah. I love that. And of course it's more than just personal, right? It's more than just like, well, that's right. It does kind of remind us of the old days, doesn't it, honey? Like, there's more than that there. It's also recognizing, like, it's not just personal to them. Like, Thingol, the union of Thingol and Melian is a big deal apart from the fact that it makes Thingol personally happy, right?
Yes.
This is, and so again, it's him to realize, like, I was not realizing that this relationship between my daughter and this dude is like of cosmic significance, but it turns out it is, right?
Yes.
And the
Step one
very
of breaking the
parallel
world.
helps it. Yeah.
Was Thingol and Melian.
Yes.
And
Right.
yeah, so because we wanted to emphasize that part of the scene, we may have lost a little bit of the Beren being so metal to impress the entire court of Doriath with the hand thing.
Right.
So I don't know if that's a bad thing. I mean, because it is a cool scene, obviously, for him
It
to be
is.
like, ha ha ha.
Right.
But
the quest is achieved. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, we wanted to have the doubts in the beginning and then more certainty at the end, but still in that process, talking through what to do,
Right.
mention that they're relying on Thingol's mercy because we didn't want it to be a done deal for the
Right.
audience, that they're going to go back to Doriath and everything's going to be fine.
Yes.
So that's part of what it is we're working through all these things to get to that point. And something may have been lost in all that. I do acknowledge.
No, I mean that is definitely. I was feeling the difference in that scene,
Yes.
even just from the outline. I was feeling the difference in that scene.
Yes.
But I can see what would be gained by that shift.
Yeah.
There.
Well, because the as Marie said, you know, if we left Brethel with the knowledge that Thingol was caught in this situation, right? Like, case closed, Beren gets Luthien, right?
Right.
Well, that's not really true, is it? Like, he's still got to give his consent. And we didn't want to set it up as Thingol can either go back on his word or allow Beren to marry his daughter. He should willingly grant that, and this gave him the agency to do that.
Okay. And the wedding under Hero Lorne, awesome, right? Again, we can pay off some more of the like the reunion of Luthien and Hero Lorne, after their last scene at her escape.
We're not done with that yet either, by the way.
Right. I figured. Again, like the scope, the wealth of scope for payoff in this project is so marvelous. Like, it's just the best. That's what I love about this episode. But speaking of that, it's getting late and we haven't even talked about Galadriel. So let's talk about the choice, which was the biggest surprise to me. It's the thing I did not see coming. Is that
it's the thing you didn't tell us to do. Yes.
Exactly. It was a surprise, but it was a fun surprise. Galadriel comes back and gives Thingol a piece of her mind. This is kind of awesome. So tell me the role. Okay, so first of all, I want to focus on Galadriel's character. Like, where is this showing us about where she is and what's been happening with her? So let me recap. By which I mean, let me try to make sure I'm remembering correctly, and pretend that I'm re-educating the listeners while doing it. We got Galadriel in season 4 through her PTSD in Doriath, right? So she was all in Doriath for all of season 4. We had her friendship with Luthien. We had her learning from Melian. We had her meeting Celeborn, and Celeborn, being a good listener and helping her to work through her sense of guilt and everything from the kinslaying and everything else. And then we ended with the wedding of Galadriel and Celeborn at the end of season 4. In season 5, they were peripherally involved when the humans were coming over the mountains into Beleriand. They were hanging out with the green elves of Osiriand during the unfriendship incident, right, when the humans came over. And she was basically trying to act as like diplomat. So we had her meeting some of those early humans who came over, not Beor's family, but the Estolads, right, were the ones that she was meeting. And So anyway, so she and was trying to mediate basically between the green elves and the Estolads. How did that end, by the way? Like, where do we leave her? That was the one thing I couldn't remember.
She went to Doriath to talk to Thingol about it, and Thingol decided, you know what? No humans could ever enter Doriath.
Right. Okay. So that didn't go well.
And she essentially delivered that and a similar decree from Assyrian, with perhaps somewhat gentler language, I think, if I recall. Right. Like, please, if you don't mind, don't bring your pigs across the river, and we won't kill any of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No more hangings in the woods.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, please. Thank you very much.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So it was basically a boundary dispute, and she tried to establish the boundary between Assyrian and Estolad.
Right. Right.
Conveniently, there's a major river there, so
right. So, which they decided on for the boundary.
Yeah.
So she
as boundary disputes go, it was fairly straightforward.
Right. Right. Okay. So that was the last we saw. Was her? What was her? What were we making of her attitude in this? Was she? I mean, she was kind of she was placed awkwardly, right? The green elves were not, were ready to just shoot him. And then she goes to Thingol to talk about it. And he's like, let's just ban them. Right. And so she has these two messages of unfriendship to deliver. And I recall her being a little bit uncomfortable with it. She wasn't just like on board with the anti-human sentiment of either Assyrian or Doriath at that point.
While still, though, recognizing that the humans were very different and dangerous to the elves in ways that other elves are not, while yet also not being straight up evil. Right. Like, because up until now, other than animals, their dangers have all been coming at them from Morgoth, right? From the Dark Lord. And
because even the dwarves have never been themselves a source of. I mean, there was some tension and stuff, but they didn't. There were never battles, were there?
Right. Yeah. No, the dwarves weren't interested in fighting the elves and going out. Right. That wasn't. What's the profit in that? Right. But these humans, they're different, and it's because in a way they kind of are animals in a way that the elves are not. Because their mortality makes them so. The elves are made of the stuff of Arda, and so yes, they are closer to nature itself, but their spirits are ascended in a way that they have more spiritual control over the body. Is that right? It's because that's what it is. So it's because of their spiritual their connection between their spirit and the matter of their bodies that allows them, because they are more connected, the instincts that drive us to do the things that we know we shouldn't do have to do with the fact that our spirits are not connected enough with our bodies to prevent that.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Elves do not struggle with concupiscence.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, the medievals would have talked about it in terms of the relative subordination or insubordination of appetite and reason, right?
Yes.
That elves are not ruled by their appetites in the way that humans are ruled by their appetites. That is the fundamental disorder that in the Middle Ages they're saying like that was original sin. This is why in Paradise Lost, what's the first thing that happens after Adam and Eve eat the fruit? They immediately drop and have randy sex in the bushes. Like, that's the first thing that happens in Paradise Lost, because like appetite takes over. Like, as soon as the appetite is no longer subjected to reason. And so yes, anyway, point is, agreed. That particular kind of struggle is a struggle that elves don't have, which is why elves don't struggle with concupiscence. That's why there's not a it is only like in very strange and sort of deviant cases that there's something like even a temptation to infidelity or something like that among them. They just don't experience that issue.
Now, possessiveness over jewels, though.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
they've got that one.
Everyone's got some issue or other, right? But no, but that's
right.
that's a fundamentally different kind of
course.
thing. Yeah,
right.
I'm tempted to appeal to medieval categories again, but I won't. Anyway, the point is that it's yes, that's a totally different kind of spiritual and psychological profile right there.
And Galadriel recognized that difference between the humans that she was meeting and the elves, and realized, oh yeah, these cultures need to be completely separate. This would not do well together on any level. So she recognizes that, but isn't quite on board with the hostility that Assyria and Doriath are both pushing towards them.
Yeah, it's so she not right to exterminate these people. That's wrong.
That's wrong.
So she tries to be very diplomatic about, let's have a good fences make good neighbors conversation with our neighbors and see if that goes well.
Right. Right. So her perception of the alienness of humans leads to, but her general attitude towards it is more sort of constructive than
she has a conversation with Luthien, because Luthien's like, oh, these mortals, what are they like? You've met them, tell me, just out of curiosity. And so Galadriel is able to express her ideas to an elf about what she saw without just being, they're real weird.
Right. Now, when
that's where she was back in season 5.
That's where she was back. So when she busts onto the scene here in this episode, she's upset about the death of Finrod. Now, she repents calling him a kinslayer, which I kind of love, by the way. But tell me more about her frame of mind at the beginning of the episode and how it changes.
So I will admit that a certain amount of this story came out of my jealousy with Rings of Power for coming up with Vengeful Galadriel before I did and getting there first. I don't think I'll ever forgive them for that.
Especially since they were following in our footsteps with PTSD Galadriel in the first place. Right.
And like, as soon as I realized that that's where they were going, I was like, oh, that solves a problem I've been having. And now I can't use it. Yes. And so basically what we did was take that and kind of misplace it. Towards Thingol, and it's not entirely misplaced. Like, she's got every reason to be peeved for him setting the ball rolling on this.
Deserves peeve. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, is no one in Doriath was going to say any of this stuff to him,
right?
Because Doriath is full of people who are like, yes, Thingol, he is our king and the greatest, and we agree with everything he ever says and does.
Right. And this is the crux of why this is in this episode, really.
Right. So we needed somebody external to call him on some of his stuff, to show what work he needed to do to reconcile with Luthien before she came back.
Right.
And we needed him to admit he was wrong to somebody other than Melian.
Right.
Because it wouldn't have felt like it was worth anything if he just told his wife in private, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Like, there would have been no cost to him.
Yes.
And presumably he's the kind of guy who has to say stuff like that to his wife all the time.
Right.
I don't know anybody like
there
that.
There are downsides of marrying a goddess. It's true.
Anyway, so that's why we introduced Galadriel. And what has changed for her from the last time we saw her until now is that 3 out of 3 of her brothers have been killed brutally by Sauron or Balrogs, or and
bad guys.
Bad guys. Yeah. So we did not show her reaction to the deaths of Angrod and Aegnar in
Right, we focused on
the Dagger
Finrod's
Bragollach.
reaction there.
We
Yeah.
did. And that is partially my fault because Nick really wanted to put it in there and I just crossed it right out of his script.
Well, it would have been out of nowhere because she was not involved. You know, I mean,
Well, that was my argument, but I wanted to focus on Finrod's reaction and really make sure we got that.
I totally support your decision. I mean, with Galadriel, to bring Galadriel in there would have just been like a cameo, like there is a disturbance in the Force kind of moment, you know, from really far away, and it wouldn't have gone anywhere, right? So it's fine.
So unfortunately, it didn't really fit there, but it was something we really wanted to touch on at some point, somewhere.
Yeah.
Her brothers are dying, and she knows it. So it didn't really fit in the Dagger Bragollach episode, unfortunately, but it fit here because now it's happened again for the third time. So she's even more upset than she was before. And she wants answers as to what happened because it's not a war right now. She knows what happened to Angrod and Aegnar. They were killed in battle. But with Finrod, she doesn't know what this is all about.
He was safe.
Yeah. Like, he was in Nargothrond and safe, and like nothing's going on. What happened?
Yeah, it puts me in. Sorry, I was just saying it puts me in mind, and of course now because it's been so long since I've read it, and because I get confused between what's in the movie and what's in the books, and what is in the movie because like it certainly happened in the books, even if we didn't. The words of it aren't there, but Eomer's reaction to finding Éowyn on the battlefield, which like Carl Urban, oh man alive, he sells that. Like
that is one of my single favorite acting moments in the entire trilogy. Is that moment?
He's so wrecked because she was safe. She wasn't supposed to be there. Like that was not a thing that he could have imagined could have happened. Yeah. And I can imagine Galadriel feeling
this.
Right.
Yeah. Some sorcery must have what madness or devilry is this, he says. Right?
Right. And because he's very calmly like being like, yes, you know, the king has fallen and here's his comrades who have fallen with him. Like he's trying to be like, I should be a good leader and memorialize
Let me compose
these
some
people,
alliterative poetry for the moment.
To commemorate these people who died with their king. That's the thing you do in this situation. And then he gets to his sister and he's like, what?
Yes. And he loses it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's just like death. So we wanted to see that now because that seems to be where Galadriel is. So at the beginning of the episode, she's just going to Doriath to get some questions answered. She doesn't know what happened. Doriath's closer than Nargothrond, so she's coming from Assyrian. So she goes to Doriath first, assuming that they've heard news and that they could fill her in. Yeah. And someone tells her, oh yeah, well, Finrod died at full Syrian because Sauron took over. It's like, okay, well, what was he doing there? It's like, oh well, he went on a quest with the son of Bear here. Oh yeah, there's outlaws in Dorthonion. I heard about them. What was that all about? And as the story of the quest comes out, it finally comes out. It's like, well, Thingol sent them. And that's when she loses it, when she realizes that this stupid quest that her brother died on, the only reason he was in that tower to get killed by Sauron in the first place, was Thingol's fault. And from getting that news, she immediately goes to Thingol and confronts him. So she's angry and just saying whatever's on her mind. And that's where she accuses him of being a kinslayer.
So the only thing about this entire sequence that I didn't love was her apology afterwards. I'm on her side. I'm on her side. Like, so, because in fact, I would add some hard words I think she undersold it. Because I think that like she and you were a big enough idiot to stir to life the oath of Fel Feanor. Right? Like we were moving past that now, and you of all people, Thingol, right? You and your anti-Noldor, specifically anti-Feanorian thing, you're gonna spit in their faces right now and stir up the evil power of this oath, and look what came of it as soon as you did, right? Yeah. I mean, Like that's
Yeah.
I'm not only do I think she needn't apologize as much as she does, I
Well,
think she's still pulling punches.
I agree with you on the point that, like, challenging him on activating the Oath of Feanor in his own direction.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And just the sheer stupidity of the whole thing. Sure. But
there's a sense in which he has vacated the high ground on the kinslaying issue. Right? Like, I mean, he was right to be like, yeah, y'all like murdered our kin and then came and lied to us about it. That's a big deal and that's not okay. And he was like on the high ground that whole time, right? I'm not saying that necessarily his actions in response to that are all perfectly okay, or that his attitude was perfectly constructive, but he was on the high ground here, right? As soon as he says, actually, I'd kind of like a Silmaril for my own self, right? Now, like, it's done. It's got like no more complaints
of how serious that actually was.
Yeah.
However, none of that means that he killed Finrod.
Totally does, though. No, I'm still with Galadriel. Still his fault. No, again, I agree. Obviously,
Thingol did not force Beren to go to Finrod.
No, he didn't.
But nobody, like you could say that once Beren's at Finrod, at Nargothrond, then Finrod is now compelled to act to his aid. So unless Beren...
But see, here's the thing. This is why I think Galadriel is wise enough to see past all these things. She's wise enough to see the same thing that Finrod saw. Yeah. And thus are we all ensnared. Right.
Well, let's say,
and she's like, Beren's and who did the ensnaring? Who set this in motion? Right. By laying this upon him, like, no, you didn't force him to go to Nargothrond. You didn't force Thingol to. But again, none of that would have. You kicked the hornet's nest. Right. This whole tangle of destinies in which Finrod was trapped. He didn't choose it. He was trapped. He says he's trapped. Right now, in the midst of being trapped, he does the right thing. Right. But he was trapped. And who trapped him? Whose fault is that? Right. Yeah. Who kicked that off? And again, it's not just like, oh, I just made an innocent suggestion. I didn't know that he was going to go. No, you didn't make an innocent suggestion. You activated the Oath of Feanor. What did you think was going to happen?
Right.
Like, you know, kinslaying. That is the highway to kinslaying, and you went down the highway to the kinslaying. That's what
happens when you call the feds.
Exactly. That's what happens. So yeah, like not sorry.
So the only reason that she's being apologetic here is that she's a bit sheepish that she confronted the king and just went off.
Right.
She knows she was out of line. Yeah. She knows she was rude and out of line. So she knows that she has to apologize for her behavior, even if she doesn't really take back what she said. So we can walk back her apology a little bit and just be that she can apologize for her, inconsiderate.
I was hasty in my...
Right. I spoke hastily. I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of everybody. I should have...
Right. That's
sought you really out in private and then yelled.
But I want to clarify something, is that we're seeing the crumbling of the cult of personality around Thingol, right? It's like it's not just here, like throughout the past couple of seasons even. I think as soon as humans show up on the scene, we're starting to see that start to fall apart.
Because
maybe even as early as the Dagor Aglareb, when because don't
he doesn't make it.
Yeah, they get there late with coffee, right? Like that's how we played that essentially, right? And so as soon as that happens, the confidence that's when his people start hiding stuff from him, essentially, and start kind of like mollycoddling him a little bit.
So no, I mean, I do think this is part of the character arc for Thingol to have him be publicly confronted and called out in this way. But I think Galadriel knows she's just was out of turn. She's a guest in his kingdom. You're not supposed to do that. So I think she needs to be sheepish and apologetic about her behavior,
especially since he comes to her.
Yeah, that's like, as soon as she sees him coming, he's like, I better apologize. But I agree that we don't necessarily have to have her take back what she says.
Yeah.
Um, and all she has to admit is that Finrod always knew he was going to die.
Yes.
And therefore, this was something that he saw coming long before you said anything. Like,
and all of this stuff was going to happen.
Yeah, like she has to recognize that there's fate involved here.
Yeah.
So it doesn't let him off the hook. It's just that's her processing it a little better instead of in the moment where she was really mad about it. Now she's had a chance to realize, oh, right, this is probably fate at work.
I could see a way in which she could kind of apologize while also doubling
still accusing
down,
him.
essentially, right? And
she's clever enough to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because of course one of the things that she could quite truthfully say is, yeah, I do understand. Again, Finrod was going to die. This was destined to happen. The only thing really that your actions did was involve you and your realm in the mess and fate and downfall that Finrod was already entangled in. So it's
so
true
good
that
luck with that.
Yeah, you've just screwed your own self.
Yeah.
And so I shouldn't be mad at you about that.
Yeah, no, that's really good because part of the whole thing here is that we're going to end this season on a happy note for Beren and Luthien.
Right.
But this is the end of Doriath.
Yeah.
Like Doriath is not going to survive
This
much
is the
longer.
last happy moment for Doriath. Yeah.
Thingol himself is going to be dead in like 25 years.
Yeah.
So because of the Silmaril,
Yeah.
it's his own doom hasn't quite caught up to him yet.
Yes.
But he's already sealed his fate.
Yeah, he already signed the check on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it just hasn't got here yet. And by elven terms, the guy's lived thousands and thousands of years. 25 years is not much longer.
He's due to die in like 25 minutes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so so she can say that something ominous about the future and Silmarils and oaths, and I think that's
right.
Fine.
Yeah. No, I guess you're right. There's no point. There's no point in holding a grudge because you're totally hosed now, and I expect to outlive you by millennia at this point. So, I agree.
Good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Yeah. No, because and it's one of the things that I really like about this whole thing is that there's a way in which this the confrontation with Galadriel serves as a emotionally amped up recollection of and commentary on Melion's remark to Thingol at the end of that scene, right? The "O King, you have devised cunning counsel" speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is saying mildly and gently, right? Well, great. Now we're all hosed thanks to that, right?
Yes.
And so, but again, it's brief, it's quiet, it's private, and to kind of bring that back in again and make it, because again, I think it's another way that certainly helps the viewer to appreciate Thingol's own change of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why does the wicked king father now suddenly decide, oh, actually it's fine, I don't mind the interloper human scumbag who wants to marry my daughter? If he so it's especially interesting in the context that there's all the focus on the other end of like, oh, but there's my oath to Thingol, have I fulfilled my oath to Thingol? And on the other hand, to show on the other side Thingol being like, actually that oath was such a bad call, I really screwed that up. And
this makes him a character.
Yeah. No, I like that. So no, I thought I was surprised, but I quite enjoyed the Galadriel intervention, and I really like the work that it's doing there in that way. Cool. All right. Well, next time, so we're gonna have a little bit of an interlude. So we're gonna meet again in 2 weeks. We're gonna have a little bit of an interlude before we discuss the next episodes, because the next 2 episodes are big ones. We've got the death of Beren and Luthien, and then we have the afterlife of Beren and Luthien in the next 2 episodes. So big stuff going on. And the hope is to have scripts written for those. I know. We'll see what happens. It all will be great one way or the other. But in any case, we're going to have a little bit of an interlude. Next time, we're going to talk about the frame. So we've been kind of pushing off the frame. And actually, I will admit, when the frame has been included in the outlines and the scripts, I've been deliberately not reading them because I don't want to like get distracted. I knew we were going to wait to talk about the frame, so I've been waiting to like even read the frame stuff until, because I knew I'd want to talk about it.
So should we be going through and anytime that the frame is in a script, pulling that out and then like creating like a single document?
Might be handy to have it in one place. That might be,
yes, I understand that. I know that's my assignment for next time.
that might be fun. I can go back and find it all. I know where it is.
No.
You know,
I'll give you a single document. Don't worry.
That might be easy. But in any case, we're going to talk about the frame. So we'll talk about the whole shape of the frame story from beginning to end. And of course, the frame story. This is the one frame story we decided like way back at the very beginning that the frame story of this would be Estelle being told his true identity and Aragorn falling in love with Arwen. So it's
been harder to manage its connection than you would think.
The parallel seems so obvious at first.
And
I mean,
yet,
again, it was a complete no-brainer when we said, I mean, like, it was like one of the first things we said when we were thinking of the concept of the framework. Well, obviously, the frame of the Beren and Luthien story will be, you know, Tenuviel, so no problem. But, no, so that's that. It's going to be fascinating to talk about. So that will be the subject of our discussion, April 27th at 10 p.m. And don't forget about the casting nominations. Last chance to nominate actors for the roles from this season. The nominations will close right before the next episode, and we'll open up voting at that point. So, all right. Very good. Thank you, guys. This was a lot of fun. This is as I say, this is a delightful episode in so many ways. This episode, as I say, it's like a crystallization of what is fun about film. So really, really enjoyed that. Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
And the script team.
And everybody else who was there.
And everybody else who was there. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.